What you do the first week of school sets the tone for the entire year. So you want to make sure you get off on the right foot.
Make sure you and Jenny get off on the right foot.
So in this video, I'm going to break down the 8 things you need to do, the 8 must-dos in order to start off the school year right. So here we go. Number 1, know the school-wide procedures. You want to make sure you're in line with what the entire school is doing, because you don't want the things you're doing or things you're not doing affect other people on campus. So here are 10 things you got to make sure you know how to do, and 10 things you got to be aware of, so that way you can be in line with your entire school. Number 1, make sure you know your bill schedule. And don't let kids out early, and don't let kids out late, because that affects other people. Because, hey, if I'm like, hey, class, you guys are good, and you know what, if you're good, you get out 5 minutes early. Well, if I let those kids out of my class, yay for me, it makes my life easier. But that is impacting somebody else. That's impacting the lunch people. That's impacting security. That's impacting somebody else. So make sure you don't let people out early. Make sure you don't let them out late, because then they're late to the next class and sets the other teacher up for failure. So don't do that. Make sure you know your bell schedule. Be cognitive of the time. Know when things start and end. Know that inside and out. Write it down if you have to, but just make sure you really know the bell schedule, so that way you don't negatively impact somebody else. The second thing for procedures you need to know is attendance. You got to know how to take attendance. For my school, we take attendance different ways. First one is a hard copy. We have to do a hard copy of a roster, and the other one is in the computer. And we need to do that within the first 10 minutes. So those are our requirements. So you got to make sure you know how to do that, and you got to put some sort of system in place to make sure that happens, because you don't want to be that one teacher that had to keep calling and reminding, because it gives you a negative opinion about what you are and who you are and what you are doing. The third school-wide thing you got to know is who to call. Who to call in case there's an emergency. Who to call in case there's a student you need to have escort out. Who to call in case there's a medical condition in your classroom. Who to call if a kid needs a textbook. Just know who you need to call to get things done. And trust me, that takes a little bit harder to figure out, because there's so many moving parts. And a lot of times you don't even know those moving parts until something comes up. But do your very best to know exactly who's in what position and who you need to call to get things done. The fourth school-wide procedure you got to know is hall passes. If a kid needs to leave your class, how are you going to communicate that to somebody outside your classroom? Maybe it's campus security, maybe it's the nurse, maybe it's the office. But I'm sure your school has a system put in place to have students leave your classroom and go somewhere else. Maybe it's a hall pass, maybe it's a virtual, maybe it's a hard copy. Each school is different, but become very familiar with that, because you want to make sure that you're following the rules on that one. So once again, it goes right in line with what everybody else on the campus is doing. Number 5 school-wide procedure you got to know about is how to deal with discipline. You're going to try to take care of discipline in your classroom by calling home and dealing with it how you need to in your class, which can be kind of difficult sometimes. But there may be times where you need to have that student leave your class. And then what is your school's policy for that? How do they want you to handle that? Is there a form you got to fill out? Is there somebody you got to call? Can you just send them out of the classroom? Become acquainted with that, so that way you can fall in line with what everybody else is doing. 6 school-wide procedure you got to know about are what are the norms on the campus? What is going to be tolerated and what is not tolerated? Is there a school-wide policy for cell phones? Is there a school-wide policy for gum, for pencils, being prepared, backpacks? So get familiar with all the school-wide norms that either other teachers or other administration puts in place, so that way you can make sure you're in line. Fire drill, that's another one. Another procedure is fire drill. Oh man, make sure you got this down, because chances are there's going to be something you have to take with you, some sort of emergency backpack. You may have to leave a sign behind for somebody checking your classroom. You might have to go line up somewhere else. And it's embarrassing. I'm telling you, it's embarrassing. If everybody just has it down and you're that one class that has no idea what to do, you don't want that reputation. So understand the fire drill procedures. The 7th thing you got to make sure you have is your grading. You want to make sure your grading lines up with the other teachers in your department. Now, some schools require this, some do not. But man, how powerful is it that if your grading lines up with theirs? And let's say you have to do everything. You don't have to do your lessons the same. You don't have to do the teaching the same. But if the overall outcome, how a grade is earned, is the same, that commonality is going to make you in sync with the other people around you. So get familiar with the grading and what the other teachers around you are doing. The ninth thing you got to know is, what do you do if you're ever absent? If you're ever going to be absent, what is the policy, the routine for that? Who do you contact? How do you get lessons to them? What are your expectations? What are the expectations of you on what you need to do to make that happen? Because trust me, do not wait to the moment where you're sick to try to figure this out. It's going to send all sorts of chaos through your school. So make sure you understand that rules, the policy, the procedure that is put in place if you ever need to call out sick. And the 10th school-wide procedure you got to be aware of is there any extra duty positions you got to fulfill? Do you have to be yard duty? For us, we have a duty like once every 3 weeks, we got to monitor outside. So understand that, understand the schedule, if there's a schedule, understand what's expected of you, where you need to be at. Maybe the principal administration wants you standing by your door. Just get familiar with that as well. The second must do is this: make sure you set up your classroom and create a seating chart. So the first one is kind of understand all the norms of the school, understand the procedures of the school. And we went through those 10 things you want to make sure you're in line with. But now let's talk actually about your class. What do you need to do in your class? And so the second thing you got to make sure you do, or the second must do, is this: create a seating chart and set up your classroom. Now, I can tell you this, in my opinion, is probably the most important thing. You can deter and stop a lot of negative behavior just with a good seating chart. Once you become familiar with your students, you know where to put them in your class. Because if you have a student that's very disruptive, you may want to put them in the front of the class. If you have a student that's very shy, you may not want to put them in the front because they may feel very overwhelmed. Maybe some sort of accommodations are needed. You can put them back. You got to know your students' accommodations. You know all these things. And this, well, I call this the battle plan before the war, right? Because if I can strategically put students where the most effectiveness will come out of it, I'm already halfway done with the game, right? So create a good seating chart and set up your room. Think about where things are going to go. Think about the flow of traffic and everything else. Now, in my personal opinion, if you are not a master of classroom management, I would not start off the school year in groups. As much as that's being promoted, as much as collaboration is awesome, if you don't have good classroom management, that's going to blow up in your face. So usually I recommend start off in rows or maybe pairs the most, but then later on, once that classroom management thing is situated and it's settled, then at that point in time you can move things to groups. The third must do is make copies before you need them. I would highly recommend that you make your copies for the first week or two. Have that done before school year even starts, before students even walk on campus, a day or two before students walk on campus, and you have that little bit of prep time. Make all your copies, because it's going to happen. If you've been teaching any amount of time, you know how this goes. The moment you really need a copy machine is when it breaks down. There's a line, out of toner, out of paper, or something. Do not put that pressure on you. Do not do that. Whatever it takes, make your copies way ahead of schedule. That way, when everybody else is scrambling, you kind of relax knowing that you have the material you need to have for that day. So make your copies before you need them. Fourth must do is this: focus on classroom management for the first 2 weeks. The busiest time of my entire school year is my first 2 weeks. My first 2 weeks, I'm on top of everything classroom management wise. I know exactly what I'm expecting from students, and if the students fall short of that, I immediately correct that behavior. And that takes time, that takes energy to do that. But you got to do that. And trust me, it's going to be exhausting. It is going to be exhausting the first 2 weeks. But I promise you, those dividends, you're going to see them later on the school year. When later on the school year, when other classes seem to be going crazy, yours is going to be just even all the way through. But it starts with that classroom management. There's an old saying, I don't necessarily agree with this, but the saying is, don't smile until Christmas. Don't necessarily agree with that statement, but I understand the meaning behind it. The meaning is that you come in structured. You come in with a plan. You make sure students adhere to that. And any deviation from that, then of course you immediately correct the behavior. But if you let things go the first week or two, that is going to set the tone for the rest of the school year, and you're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. So make sure you focus on that classroom management for the first 2 weeks. The fifth must do is create a syllabus. The syllabus communicates to students what you are expecting them to do, and a syllabus creates to parents what they can expect from your class. Now, I'll be 100% honest. I have my students sign them and bring them back, and I give them credit for their assignment and everything else. But I know, oh man, I would say 99% of the parents, they don't read the syllabus. I know I don't read my kids' syllabus. I just trust that they're going to do what they're supposed to do. So I use the syllabus in my class, first of all, just to get introduced to rules and procedures, right? That's how I use the syllabus in my class. But also I use it as a way to create that classroom management, to create the flow of the class. So I use it as an assignment. I'm not just, I mean, I could just give them a syllabus, they sign it and bring it back, right? I could do that, but no one's getting anything from it. So what I do is I use the syllabus as an assignment. So that way we can start practicing some of those rules and procedures. Number 6, rules and procedures. So I use that syllabus to go over the rules and procedures. All right. It could be anything as far as coming to class prepared, what you need to do if you have a question, restroom, you name it. What are my rules and procedures I have? I put that in my syllabus. And then as we're going through the syllabus, we're talking about those rules and procedures. So that is the 6th thing you got to make sure you have down is make sure you communicate that to your students, what your rules, procedures, and expectations are. Number 7, practice those rules and procedures. So we got the syllabus to share the information. We got the rule procedures in the syllabus, but number 7 is you got to practice those procedures. Now you're going to think I'm making this up, but I promise you, first 3 days, I kind of have a little sequence of events, but 3 days of my first week of school, 3 days of that first week or two, I am going over my warm-up. So when students walk into class, I have a procedure put in place where students will have the information on the board and they'll complete the task in the first 5-8 minutes of class. I spend 3 days going over that rule and procedure. And I'm telling you, by the end of the 3 days, they have it down. But here's the beauty of it. Once I spend those 3 days on it, because that's something I'm going to be doing every day in my class for the entire school year, they know exactly what to do. So on the 4th day, I don't have to go over instructions for the first 8 minutes of class. They know exactly what they got to do. And so I do that with all my rules and procedures. Anytime I want students to do something, we practice it. So number 7 is practice rules and procedures. And number 8 is put the time in now calling home. Once again, I said the first 2 weeks would be the most exhausting. And part of that is you want to call home. If there's some negative behavior, you want to stop it right away and call home right away. You don't want to let that multiplier get out of control. All right, you got to address it right away with the student and even with the parent if need be. But also try to call home for good reasons. Because if you set a good standard where you're calling home just for good reasons, if something ever does come up later on, the parents are going to be more willing to work with you. So those first 2 weeks, I would plan on spending late hours at my school so that way I can make sure I focus on all of those things as well as creating that relationship with parents.